Megacity 1 is a huge fictional city-state covering much of what is now the eastern United States, and some of Canada in the Judge Dredd comic book series and its spin-off series. The exact geography of the city depends on which writer and artist has done which story, but from its first appearance it has been associated with New York City's urban sprawl. Originally it was presented as a future New York, which was retconned as the center of a Megacity 1 in the very next story. The Architects Journal placed it at No. 1 in the list of comic book cities. Development. When the series Judge Dredd was being developed in 1976-77, it was originally planned that the story would be set in New York in the near future. However, when artist Karl drew his first story for the series, a skyscraper in the background of one panel looked so futuristic that editor Pat Mills instructed him to draw a full-page poster of the city. Esquerra's vision of the city, with massive tower blocks and endless roads suspended vast distances above the ground with no visible means of support, was so futuristic that it prompted a rethink, and a whole new city was proposed. Art director Doug Church suggested that the city should extend along the entire eastern seaboard, and be called Megacity 1, and his idea was adopted. While the first Judge Dredd story is set in New York 2099 AD, Prog 3 retconned that and said New York was just part of Megacity 1. The back of Prog 3 included an Esquerra Futuregraph poster of Megacity 1, a page from an unused Dredd story, which said the city stretched from Montreal to Georgia and had 150 million citizens. It was part of the United States of the West. USW. Prog 4 then established that Megacity 1 was surrounded by wilderness from the atomic wars. The 150 million population was later revised to 100 million in earlier strips and abruptly bumped to 800 million later on. The United States of the West concept was dropped entirely. A United Cities of North America of 3 megacities was mentioned in Prog 42 and then itself dropped in favor of Megacity 1 being an independent entity. In early strips, the judges existed alongside a regular police force, were popular with the citizens, and the people enjoyed robots doing the work, with the grand judge saying they would not consent to work more than 10 hours a week. Over time, the strip would have the judges as a feared police state force with sole power. Prog 118. Written when unemployment was going up in Britain, established that citizens resented being unemployed and took up bizarre crazes to deal with the boredom, and this remained part of the strip from then on. Description. Megacity 1 evolved out of a growing conurbation stretching from Boston to Washington, D.C., which took form in the 21st century to cope with the escalating population crisis in America and, as a solution chosen to deal with the high crime rate, led to the introduction of the judge system. Megacity 1 was one of 3 major areas to survive the nuclear war in 2070. Due to an experimental laser missile defense system built not long before. Apart from those megacities, the United States has been reduced to the cursed Earth. Eventually, Megacity 1 extended to Miami, Florida, which became a holiday resort, and spread west into Ohio and/or West Virginia. The megacity was built over the top of the old cities and the polluted Ohio River, creating the lawless Undercity, though a few buildings like the Empire State Building and Statue of Liberty were moved to Megacity 1 for the tourists. Maps of the city show that in the early 22nd century, it stretched roughly from southern Maine down through Florida into the northeast, has absorbed the Quebec City-Windsor corridor in Canada. 800 million citizens lived in the city at this point. The population and city sprawl were halved by nuclear attack and Soviet invasion in 2104. In the 1982 story The Apocalypse War, with the loss of the entire South in a saturation nuclear strike. The Northwest and Upper North were also lost, leaving the city stretching from roughly New Hampshire through North Carolina and losing the Canadian Territory. A small part of the Northwest survived. The Northwest Hab Zone, separated from the rest of the city by a stretch of radioactive wasteland called New Cali and linked to the main city by a bridge. The population remained at around 400 million from 2104 until 2134. Megacity 1 has a far greater population density than any city in the present-day world. Most city dwellers, citizens, live in huge apartment blocks, 50,000 plus, though many citizens live a perpetually nomadic existence in vehicular mopeds, mobile homes, due to inadequate housing provisions. These citizens travel the city via the many public transport routes available, rarely stopping. Some mopeds are quite luxurious, complete with swimming pools. For administrative purposes, the city is divided into 305 sectors, most of them renamed to fit the new size of the city after the Apocalypse War, and clumped into Central, North, South, East, and West. Sectors 1, the center, to 300 constitute the main city. The Northwest Hab Zone encompasses sectors 301 to 5. The Hab Zone was mostly ignored by the city, and Sector 301 became disparagingly nicknamed the Pit due to its high crime rate, until Chief Judge Dredd had it cleaned up in 2118. Other slum areas have been called Angeltown, Sector 13's slums, and the Lowlife. Following the events of the 2011 12-story Day of Chaos, set in 2134, Megacity 1 was left in ruins and almost 90% of its population was killed. After decades of being the main megacity and superpower on Earth, the city is now bankrupt and in severe decline, with many judges considering the situation unsustainable. However, over the following few years the city began to grow again due to immigration, taking in of refugees, and the gradual return of millions of citizens who sat out the plague, overseas and off-world. By October 2137 the population stands at 72 million and is growing rapidly. However, the destruction of the Academy of Law during Chaos Day has disrupted the supply of cadets, and it is all the remaining judges can do to cope with the expanding population, as it will be years before replacement of losses is reliable again. Inconsistencies. The internal geography of Megacity 1 has often been ignored or changed for the needs of any given story. Bob's Law in Prog 355 set out a specific numbering system for sectors. The landlocked city Central, far from New York, was sectors 1 to 20. City East was sectors 21 to 108, radiating in sequence from Central. South and West followed a similar pattern, and northward to the same, on an east-west basis. This was then consistently ignored. For example, Sector 13 was given docks in The Simping Detective to better fit the noir style. Sector 1 generally seems to be in the former New York City, based on the Statue of Liberty being near the Grand Hall of Justice. And wherever a character enters the Undercity, it will almost always arrive in the ruins of Manhattan, despite being built over other cities. City Bottom is level with the ground at the cursed earth and the sea. One of the more egregious clashes was in Inferno, where the Statue of Judgment is destroyed and falls through the Western Wall, which is many miles away from the eastern coast in every other story. Other territories. Megacity 1 has protectorates and colonies outside of the city walls. Various colonies on other planets, used as both settings and background detail in Dredd and its spin-off strips. Law and the city's central government are enforced by colonial martial judges. Indigenous aliens and MC1 colonialists are often oppressed, and some cause insurgencies. Military forces are often mentioned as being space-based. See military. The spin-off strip Insurrection showed that the Special Judicial Service have an outer space army to deal with any colonies where the judicial staff declare independence. The main push into space began roughly in 2095, under Chief Judge Goodman, as a way of supplying the city with resources that a post-war Earth could no longer provide. The most famous colony is the penal colony on Titan, where corrupt judges are sent. Various farms, prisons, and protectorate townships in the Cursed Earth. The Cursed Earth auxiliaries patrol the area for Justice Department. The city used to have mutant camps, where mutants born in the city were deported. But these were ended after the repeal of the mutant apartheid laws. Townships 1 through 4. Since 2130, the bulk of mutant citizens live in large towns outside of the city. Law enforcement is mostly done by mutant deputies, and unlike the city they still use the jury trial system, unless a judge demands otherwise. City blocks. Blocks are huge and can be considered to be a small town in themselves. Each one will typically possess a hospital, gymnasium, school, and shopping district. A citizen can quite literally live their whole lives without leaving their block, due to the high unemployment rate. Boredom is rife among citizens. This, coupled with the high loyalty citizens develop to their blocks, along with the city defense militia for most city blocks, leads to many block wars, riots, more like small wars, between two or more blocks. Blocks are named after famous or historical figures, often with current events in mind. A typical example, shortly after the Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise separation, there was an episode with block war breaking out between the Kidman and Cruise blocks. A proposed crackdown on civil rights in Britain led to a block being named David Blunkett Block in one story. Government. Since the abolition of democratic government in America in 2070, Megacity 1 has been a dictatorship run by the Justice Department. It subsequently became an independent city-state following the breakup of the United States and had already been granted autonomy within the Union in 2052. Its ruler is the Chief Judge. In current stories, as of January 2017, Chief Judge Barbara Hershey. She is accountable to her council of 5 judges. The citizens are permitted to have an elected city council and mayor, but with no significant power. The idea is that a facade of democracy will placate most people. In 2113, a referendum was held in which the people were allowed to decide whether to restore democratic government. But by this time the memory of democracy had become so distant that the majority of citizens did not bother to vote, and most of those who did opted to retain the status quo. In the early years of Judge Dredd, Megacity 1 had not been established as a dictatorship. The Purple People Breeder. 2000 AD Sci-Fi Special 1978. Mentioned presidential candidate Howard Serb. While Ryan's Revenge, and their annual 1979, had the mayor giving orders to Justice Department. The Lunar 1 story arc briefly mentioned the governing body, the Grand Council of Judges, and the Triumvirate, part of a unified state called the United Cities of North America. But this was dropped by Prog 61. Chief Judge, Council of 5. Mayor of Megacity 1. 2113 referendum. Civilian population. The citizens are shown to be a mixed bag. 98% are unemployed, due to advances in robotics, and range from lazy and sloth-like contempt with their existence to highly rebellious, violent criminals bent on destroying and killing as much as they can for whatever reason they can think of at that time, if any. Most of the judges seem to view them like well-loved dim cat. Stupid, greedy but with an unseen value that's worth protecting with everything they have. although at times they've shown a huge lack of empathy towards them, such as when Chief Judge Francisco asked them if a large number on welfare could commit suicide in his Christmas message in order to help balance the budget for the following year. Some judges openly view as a nuisance to be removed, alike judge man as a subhuman race to used and abused as the judges see fit. The citizens occupy their time with many strange and outright bizarre hobbies and fashions such as simping, recreational stupidity, bat gliding, sky surfing and peeping, spying on people at home and in public, which is both illegal when done for your own perversions and legal when done the same but for the judges. If any of these ever get out of hand, then and there is no legal justification for banning the judges, simply impose a heavy tax on them, restricting them to only the few super wealthy citizens. Most are poorly educated and many can barely read and write. Some sectors are said to be entirely illiterate. But judges aren't that concerned, as it makes it easier for them to control the masses and they can weed out the intelligent more simply when major crimes occur. Those that can read, though, are not much better. When a book detail how to committed suicide was released, thousands of previous non-suicidal citizens, including the book's author, killed themselves en masse for no reason other than they had read how to do it in the book. At one point in some of the more dangerous blocks, the judges took to putting sedative drugs into the air systems to help keep the residents more docile, easier to control. Some, though, do show huge promise, intelligence and have extremely useful skills. Many top scientists and engineers are not judges. Most of the city's biggest advancements in areas such as food, new materials, non-weapon and military technology, medicine and architecture and construction design, including the halls of justice, came from ordinary citizens. All the major business and entertainment, apart from Justice Department propaganda channels, figures as citizens, as are a lot of the city's diplomats. But they always report to a judge before making any decisions. But not all valued skills are the same as the current ones. Examples of this are human taxidermy and professional gluttony. Most of the highly intelligent citizens, though, end in crime such as PJ Maybe and Nero Narcos. There is little for them to do with it to gain any major wealth or power. The amount of real power a citizen can gain, though, is very limited. Legally. Law. Megacity one's laws are harsh, with many crimes not found in present-day law. Possession of sugar, for example, is illegal, as is the smoking of tobacco outside of licensed smokatoriums, and coffee is banned as an illegal stimulant. The laws are enforced by the judges, who are a combination of judge and police officer. Ordinary laws are enforced more harshly than the present day, as a political choice to deal with the high crime rate. Most ordinary citizens are sent to the ISO cubes, tiny cells located within huge prisons. For example, one strip saw a citizen sentenced to a month in the ISO cubes for littering. Judges impose immediate sentences on the spot, usually lengthy sentences of imprisonment or encubement. In extreme cases, even the death penalty may be imposed, although relatively sparingly compared with the present day, reserved for mass murder or endangering the security of the city. Nevertheless, many criminals are shot to death while resisting arrest, and resistors who survive judge assault often receive a whole life cube term. The judges themselves are not exempt from the law. They are expected to obey it more strictly than any other. A violation that would earn a citizen a few months in an ISO cube would get a judge a 20-year sentence. Served as hard labor on Saturn's moon, Titan, after surgical modification to enable the convict to survive outside there without needing an expensive spacesuit. Titan is a moon of Saturn in reality, but was located over Jupiter in an early Dredd strip. When judges to make a minor mistake, anything where the citizen is alive and not in an intensive care ward, such as wrongful arrest or search. They do have to pay the citizen a compensation fee if there is no crimes to be charged with. On that basis, if they can't find any evidence for the main charge, then they will look for any minor crime or misdemeanors to charge the citizen with to get themselves off the hook. Firearm possession is only legal with the right firearms permit, which is very hard to obtain. The only real exception is for city def units, which may use heavy weapons. Since blockmania, the security on these is extreme and they are only issued during wartime. In spite of this, many firearms are in circulation. Some are sold on the black market, while others are left over from the various invasions that have occurred over the past 30 years. Some families still possess 20th-century handguns that have been handed down through the years. These are sometimes found by crime blitzers and will usually earn culprits the same penalty as a modern-day lasbluster. Torture is normally illegal, but in extreme circumstances and with orders from the chief judge they'd use it. Both physical and psychological. For example, when time is of the essence due to the city being in severe danger, or the Justice Department's authority is. They used that reason to torture Total War cell leaders, leading to the deaths of several of them. The judges covered this up by arresting them by faking heart attacks, strokes or whatever was realistic or convenient at that time, and then told their next of kin they had died. With this they could do whatever they wanted to them. They also used torture on the leading Democrats before the Democratic March, such as keeping an elderly Democrat awake all night and then realizing him without charge, knowing he would have to march all the following day, and making severe threats to another, involving his young children. Military. The original United States Armed Forces no longer exists. The explanation in Origins was that Chief Judge Goodman had built up the judges until they were a match for the United States Army, as a precaution against President Booth. When Booth was overthrown after the atomic wars, the remains of the U.S. Army were routed and finally destroyed in 2071's Battle of Armageddon. In the immediate aftermath of the war, military discipline broke down and the judges had to kill or arrest soldiers that were preying on the citizens. Megacity 1's military forces are inconsistently portrayed during crises inside the city. Regular judges or city def are almost always shown doing the fighting instead, and the military is usually mentioned in Outer Space, Day of Chaos, eventually explained that they're unlicensed to act against the civilian population. From The Cursed Earth onwards, the city's armed forces have usually been presented as a branch of the judges. Judge Troopers. Stories by Gordon Rennie introduced of Defense Div. 1990s spin-off Maelstrom had heavily armed star. Strategic target attack retaliation. Judges to carry out targeted strikes. And the insurrection serials give the Special Judicial Service its own space fleet and armed force to stamp out rebellions. In contrast, stories by John Wagner have presented the military as a separate group, with some members believing the judges are too lenient. Uniforms differ depending on the story. The Star Judges were given an origin as founded in 2108 by Commander Brand, with Brand and his original squad secretly left to die after committing an act of genocide in 2111. This was covered up as a legitimate act of war and the Stars turned into martyrs, allowing Megacity 1 to still claim the devastated planet. The main military force mentioned is the Space Corps, composed of Marines and fleets, who fight against alien races that threaten the colonies. When originally introduced in the Corps spin-off, they were judges from the Academy of Law, but in later stories these are recruited citizens. Another force are the genetic infantry, genetically engineered men, bred in a lab to be dedicated soldiers. The story Warzone had an ex-genetic infantry soldier who was a primitive version of the genetic infantry from Rogue Trooper. The City Defs, Citizen Defense, are a reserve force composed of citizens. Each city block contains a city def force in case of crises, though usually they turn up in Dredd as rogue factions waging block wars. In very rare, desperate and often last-stand scenarios, the Justice Department's auxiliaries are issued weapons and ordered to fight alongside judges, such as in the final hours of Judgment Day. Megacity 1 also runs spy networks and a Black Ops division of judges. Under Judge Barkman, their agents were brainwashed to worship the city as a god. Following Day of Chaos, the regular military, particularly the Space Corps, have been helping to keep order in Megacity 1. Tensions exists between them and the judges. By 2136, following Chaos Day and a dual war with the ex-Hind colonial insurgency, Megacity 1 no longer had the military power to stop a rebellion on Titan. Crimes. Many crimes in Megacity 1 are controlled by flamboyant mob bosses, blitzers, hitmen with self-destruct bombs implanted inside them which detonate if they surrender when apprehended. Body sharking, loaning money to people willing to put a loved one into cryonic storage for collateral. Chump dumping, conning aliens into believing Earth is a paradise, taking their money, and then dumping them into space. Face-changing crimes. The illicit use of face-changing machines to commit crimes and fraud. Footsies. People who can no longer handle the fast pace of life begin to suffer from future shock, become psychotic and begin to commit crimes. Numbers racket. Buying computer passcodes for industrial theft. Organ leggers. Those who cut up citizens and sell their organs on the black market. Perp running. Transporting felons off-world. Psychos. Telepathic protection rackets. Stookie glanding. Butchering Stookies. An intelligent alien race. For the anti-aging drug they produce. Tea baggers. Pushes of tea. A candy that tastes so good it forms an instant psychological addiction. Leisure. Most work in Megacity 1 is carried out by robots. This has led to problems with boredom and unemployment. Boredom has fostered many problems in the city, with citizens spending the leisure time rioting over jobs, experimenting on their neighbors, and running amok in the streets. Weird fads include block wars, wars between neighboring apartment blocks, waged by each block's defense militia, ugliness clinics, and odd fashions. Leisure in Megacity 1 consists of a number of weird and wonderful futuristic hobbies and attractions, including the Agrodome was conceived as a way for frustrated citizens to let off steam without endangering their fellow megas. Within the domes, citizens can vent their anger on robots, mock storefronts, and parked vehicles. Agro Limited, the owners of the Agrodome franchise, petitioned for Judge Replicants to be added to a number of their buildings as a target for client retaliation. The request was promptly refused. After problems on opening day, Dredd did his best to close the place for good but failed. Eventually the dome closed in the mid-2120s after visitor numbers fell too low to turn a profit. The alien zoos are ever popular attractions, featuring the most bizarre creatures from the Milky Way galaxy and beyond. The Central Megacity Library is open free of charge to the public and is the storehouse of information on Megacity 1 and beyond, past and present. Late fees are very high. The Dream Palace is a popular leisure activity, for some, a growing necessity, and the ultimate in escapism. Customers are plugged into dream machines where their dreams are made real. Morpheus, Inc. owned the original chain of dream palaces, but were unsuccessful in blocking the expansion of rival dream parlors. Backstreet services utilizing reconditioned dream machines. Some parlors offer other diversions to supplement their income. The Megacity Chamber of Horrors features robot replicas of history's most infamous villains. The Megacity Museum is one of the tallest buildings in Megacity 1. It specializes in the history of Megacity 1, and is home to the most complete records of pre-atomic American civilization in North America. A transceiver beacon is sited atop the museum's roof, for use by the Justice Department. The Museum of Death focuses on murderers, warfare that resulted in mass death, and historical instruments of torture. The Palais de Boing is a chain of purpose-built structures designed for boingers. Boinging is illegal outside of the Palais de Boing. The smokatoriums are giant, stinking domes, the only locations within Megacity 1 limits where it is legal to smoke tobacco and nicotine-related products. The White Cliffs of Dover were imported from a cash-starved Brit CIT in the aftermath of the atomic war. It remains a popular attraction even though it is nothing more than a crumbling pile of rock, chalk, and sand. Stooky is an illegal drug made from the glands of an intelligent alien species that stops its users aging. Withdrawal from Stooky causes users to rapidly reach their real ages. In one of the Judge Dredd novels, it is explained that an injection of pure, undiluted Stooky causes the user to actually age backwards, reverting to a younger age. Of course, this may be non-canon. Sky surfing, where citizens use powered, floating surfboards to race and perform stunts. Bat gliding, in which citizens don winged bat suits to fly on the thermals above Megacity 1. Transit systems. The high population density of Megacity 1 requires a complex system of transport. This often serves as accommodation as well as a means of getting around the city. Pedestrian. Backstreet. Two-way passages, located in Old Town and City Bottom. Broadway. A large pedestrian plaza. Crossway. Any pedway intersection, aka crosslink. Isoglide. One-way pedestrian conveyance that functions as a human conveyor belt. Pedway. Pedestrian-only walkway found right across the city at all levels. Subpeds are enclosed pedways that run under pedways. Zip strip. One or two-way pedestrian walkway that links blocks and smaller interchanges. Enclosed zip strips are called pipeways. Vehicular. Boomway. One or two-way multi-level megaway. Between 4 and 10 lanes width. 2 to 4 levels height. Filter. One-way exit or entrance to and from parking areas. Flyover. Skidway that passes over a city block, aka over zoom. Inter-block zoom. Maglev train system, which replaced the old SkyRail network in the late 21st century. Provides a link between all the city blocks in any given sector. Intersection. Road junction. Judges Lane. Two-way road that runs parallel to major roadways. Reserved for Justice Department usage. Median strip. Protective barrier which prevents accidents in one half of a road from spreading to the other half. Megacircular. Two-way. 6-lane megway which bypasses through sector traffic to benefit long-distance drivers. Megway. Largest road design in Megacity 1. Two-way. Between 4 and 20 lanes. And central reservation, aka megaway. Speedway. Throughway. Expressway. Parkorama. Ground vehicle park. Podport. Hover vehicle park. Skedway. One-way highway. Between 1 and 5 lanes. Interskeds connect one skedway to another, aka feedway. Underskeds are single-lane roads, often reserved for public service traffic only, that pass underneath skeds. Overskeds are the same, but pass over skeds. SkyRail. Obsolete monorail public transit system introduced in the early 21st century. One-third of Megacity 1 still actively uses the SkyRail network while it awaits upgrading to the Zoom system. The largest SkyRail intersection in the city is Hell's Junction. Slip Zoom. One way. Between 1 and 4 lanes. used for larger interchanges. An underzoom, aka fly-under, is a single-lane road often reserved for public service traffic only that passes under a slip-zoom superslab, the longest megway in Megacity 1, bisecting the city from north to south. 24 lanes, 1,220 kilometers in length, aka Megacity 500, way by small zones set aside megways and skedways in regular intervals where drivers can pull off and temporarily park their vehicles. Zoom tube, the most recent traffic innovation in Megacity 1. An enclosed road system where all traffic is platooned and computer-controlled for optimum speed and driver safety. History. As Judge Dredd stories are set 122 years into the future and progress forward in real time. Stories from 1977 are set in 2099, and stories from 2017 are set in 2139. They have an extensive fictional chronology. Stories in earlier issues would link Dredd to the chronology of the Invasion, Robusters, and Harlem Heroes strips. Megacity 1's construction is mentioned in Robusters once it had moved to 2000 AD, and in a story that follows from Invasion. While Megacity 1 appears in Harlem Heroes and its lead character Giant is the father of Judge Giant. The former two strips have since been retconned out of Dredd history. Before 2027, President Bill Clinton is briefly replaced and impersonated by a time-traveling mutant criminal. Commercial spaceflight begins in 2001 with the Pan-Astra shuttle flying to Mars orbit. The first flight discovers an alien corpse, the first public discovery of alien life. The International Aeronautics and Space Administration offers a 10 million cred prize to anyone who finds life on the Moon. Explorer C.W. Mooney discovers a microscopic virus, infecting himself in the process. Jimmy Carter's head is added to Mount Rushmore. By the late 2020s, America's population is rapidly approaching 1 billion, and a conurbation now stretches from New York to Washington, D.C. in an attempt to contain the populace of the East Coast states. This will eventually become the first megacity, a new kind of urban development to house greater numbers of people. The development causes huge amounts of civil unrest and gang-related crimes. 2027. An alliance of street gangs, led by the P Street Posse, storm the White House itself. Due to intimidation of the jury, no convictions occur. This incident will lead to the creation of the judge system to police the country. Eustace Fargo is appointed special prosecutor for street crime by President Thomas Gurney. 2028. President Gurney re-elected due to his support for instant street justice. 2031. First deployment of the judges in the United States, led by Chief Judge Fargo. Special centers train the new recruits, often hand-picked from the regular police, and old-style judges have to undergo the new judge training program with the power to convict and sentence criminals on the spot. 2039. The success of Megacity 1 inspires the creation of more megacities. Megacity 2 is planned to cover the western seaboard, and Texas City will cover Texas and other southern states. Other nations will follow. 2050. Earth is a mess of pollution, starvation, and wars. On June 3, Major Indira Knight, who developed America's orbital laser weapons, is the first human to leave the solar system. The Harlem Heroes win the World Aeroball Championship. 2051. Fargo resigns and attempts suicide, but survives with serious injuries. He is secretly placed in suspended animation and his death is faked. Deputy Chief Judge Solomon becomes Chief Judge. 2052. Congress passes the Autonomy Act, giving extensive powers of self-government to the three American megacities. Each megacity has its own chief judge. Solomon continues to serve as Chief Judge of Megacity 1. 2057. Deputy Chief Judge Goodman becomes Chief Judge and creates the Council of Five. Psi Division created. 2064. A new process of accelerated cloning, with DNA taken from senior judges, is created by Morton Judd to quickly bolster Justice Department's ranks. Joe and Rico Dredd are two of the first clones from this process, growing to physiological age 5 in a matter of months. 2066. 6 clones, including the Dredd twins, are inducted into the Academy of Law. 2068. Vice President Robert L. Booth is elected president, gaining support under the line that the rest of the world was living off America's backs. It later emerges that he rigged the election. 2069. International relations are soured when Booth sends troops to seize control of foreign oil reserves in the Middle East. This will later be considered part of World War III between Western capitalist nations and Arab states, but Brits see it as the only European state not to condemn it. 2070. President Booth starts the atomic wars on June 12, 2070 to mass public support. This comes as the senior judges are discussing whether to confront him. Despite Booth's promises, America's nuclear screens fail to keep out many of the retaliatory strikes. Most of the planet is devastated in a nuclear holocaust, and the world's megacities are among the few to survive relatively unscathed due to experimental laser defenses. All judges and the military are deployed to maintain order in the decaying society, with the judges forced to constantly fight against soldiers for committing criminal acts. It is discovered Booth rigged the election and killed a witness to conceal the crime. Shocked and betrayed, the citizens of America rise up against the government and call for the judges to take over the country. Fargo, secretly reawoken from suspended animation, advises Goodman to take over as ruler of the United States in a coup. Booth is sentenced to 100 years in suspended animation, but has enough loyal followers and robotic mech troops to fight a civil war against the judges. Until 2071. 2071. The Battle of Armageddon. At the heart of the Cursed Earth, near Megacity 2, Booth's army is finally defeated at the cost of the lives of 100,000 judges and troopers. The Hiroshima Accord is settled by the various global megacities. 2070 plus. Massive inflow on homeless refugees from the Cursed Earth pour into the megacities, causing a massive amount of block construction. Space is becoming even tighter. Genetic apartheid laws are soon brought in to keep mutants out of Megacity 1. Officially this is because the mutants are irrationally violent against norms, and to protect the gene pool from contamination. 2077-78. Megacity 1 citizens are still running water through Geiger counters. A desire for decadence causes the bloody new death sport Inferno to take the world by storm. The Harlem Heroes reform as the Harlem Hellcats. When the Hellcats refuse to work with the gambling syndicates, they're forced to play to the death against robots. The brutality of the 78 Hellcats murders leads to scared fans leaving and a judicial crackdown that destroys the sport. 2080. The Megacity 5000 bike race is banned when the mutant and spacer gangs start killing each other mid-race. It will continue illegally until 2100. The first competitive eating contests begin. 2083-86. Civil war breaks out between Megacity 1 and Texas City, the latter feeling it is being dominated by the other megacities while MC1 and 2 oppose its secession in the interests of unity and the highly valuable resources Texas owns. The war leads to years of stalemate, and Megacity 1 decides the conflict is pointless and allows Texas to secede. Note: this event possibly retconned by Story Origins. Quote, 2088. Establishment of Lunar 1. a moon-based megacity, by all three American megacities to renew and cement relations between them. Government of the colony is divided initially between all three cities, with a senior judge being sent every 6 months to take over as Judge Marshall. 2089. The first instance of future shock syndrome or FTC. 2095. Chief Judge Goodman announces a policy of mass interstellar colonization, as post-war Earth is low on resources. A decadent youth culture has built up around drugs, the pinstripe sound, and illegal comics. 2099. Population is now over 800 million. Chief Judge Goodman, possessed by a malevolent psychic mutant called the Monkey, is forced to undermine the stability of the city to have it descend into anarchy. Judge Dredd takes the Monkey out. The Statue of Judgment is erected in honor of the judges. Renegade droid Call Me Kenneth starts the highly destructive First Robot War, devastating large areas of the city. Judge Dredd becomes the last Judge Marshal of Lunar 1 to serve a 6-month tour of duty. Judge Tex succeeds him as permanent Marshal of Lunar 1. 2101. Deputy Chief Judge Karl, head of the Special Judicial Squad, has Goodman assassinated and assumes control. He brainwashes most of the judges into obeying him, brings in alien clerks as mercenaries, and implements increasingly insane and dictatorial rules, twice sentencing the entire city to death. Judge Dredd leads a rebellion against him and eventually succeeds, with Resistance member Judge Griffin taking over as Chief Judge. Under Karl, a vast wall has been built around Megacity 1. The powerful mutant Father Earth leads a massed attack on Megacity 1, destroying Power Tower, a controlled volcano, and unleashing a flood of lava, before being stopped. A few months later, an invasion of mutant spiders leads to the burning of entire sectors. 2102. Judge Death arrives in Megacity 1 and kills dozens before he is captured. The dying side Judge Feyy predicts an apocalypse will occur in 2120 that can only be averted if a figure known as the Judge Child, who will become Chief Judge, can be found. Judge Dredd leads a mission to retrieve the child, only to determine him as evil and leave him stranded on an alien world. 2103. The Soviet bloc of East Meg 1, using robotic pirate Captain Skank as a proxy, secretly seize control of Megacity 1 nuclear weapons and launch an attack on the city, destroying several sectors. After being caught, they nuke one of their own sectors as compensation. Judge Death is freed by the other dark judges. They go on a killing spree in Billy Carter block before their physical forms are destroyed. 2104. Orlok the assassin drugs the city water supply, increasing the aggression of the population and leading to block wars springing up across the entire city, which turns out to have just been a diversion. With the judges tied up with the block mania, the SOV judges of East Meg 1 launch the Apocalypse War. A coordinated attack shatters Megacity 1's defenses, leaves multiple blocks destroyed by nuclear weaponry. The south of the city faces total nuke-out, killing 150 million, and leads to a massed invasion by SOV forces. A bitter resistance is put up by judges and citizen defense units, despite heavy losses and the death, after being brainwashed into a SOV agent, of Chief Judge Griffin. Victory is achieved when the team led by Dredd causes the nuclear devastation of the entire East Meg 1. Judge Magruder becomes the new Chief Judge and oversees the rebuilding of the devastated city. 2107. A time travel mission is deployed to 2120 to determine the truth of Fey's deathbed prediction. The Megacity 1 of the future is discovered to be devastated and ruled by demonic creatures, including a zombie Judge Dredd. under a mutated form of the Judge child, now revealed to be responsible for the great disaster. The judges take action to ensure this future is averted. Later the Dark Judges gain physical form again and, using personal teleporters, and cause massacres across the city, even in the Grand Hall of Justice, without being stopped. They are eventually defeated and trapped in dimensional limbo. 2108. Shojin the Warlord unleashes the demonic Seven Samurai on Megacity 1, killing thousands, including the head of Psi Division. Magruder steps down and is replaced by Judge Silver. Pro-democracy activists take over a TV station and are executed live on air by Dredd. 2109. Under Silver's orders, Dredd leads the judges in a dirty tricks operation to undermine the upcoming Democratic March, including having Wally Squad, undercover judges in the crowd provoke a riot. So the judges have an excuse to go in and use violence while seemingly having the moral high ground. 2110. Morton Judd and his judge clones, the Judder, launch an attack on the Hall of Justice. They are defeated and their base in the Ozradback is destroyed. A Dredd clone named Kraken survives and is eventually turned into a Megacity judge. 2112. 14 manifestations occur in the city and across the globe, as the subterranean Duros attempt to invade. An East Meg 2 MC1 Psi team stops them. Dredd resigns and takes the Long Walk. Following doubts about the judge system caused both by Kraken and his role in breaking up the Democratic March, Silver covers up Dredd's retirement and Kraken assumes Dredd's place. While in the Cursed Earth, Dredd is injured and rendered amnesiac by the Sisters of Death. Meanwhile, the Sisters of Death are able to psychically influence Kraken into helping them cross over into Megacity 1 and to free the Dark Judges from limbo. The city is turned into a necropolis. The judges are under psychic control, with Silver abandoning his post and being turned into a zombie for Death's amusement. Decay, disease, starvation and suicide are rampant, and the Dark Judges hold daily cullings. A handful of judges who escaped brainwashing, including Dredd and Magruder returned from the Long Walks, are able to banish the Sisters, execute Kraken and capture the Dark Judges, except Death and the Sisters, but not before 60 million citizens have been killed. Magruder assumes the post of Chief Judge again, but without a council of 5. The Hunters Club organizes the sponsored charity massacre, Death Aid for Necropolis Orphans. The anonymous figure later known as Tempest takes covert control of Megacity 1's criminal underworld. 2113. Under Dredd's urging, a referendum is held where the citizens will vote whether or not, following the failure of the judges to stop Necropolis, to bring back democracy. Judge Grice and others attempt to assassinate Dredd to stop this, and are arrested. The citizens, as Dredd anticipated, vote to keep the judges, those few that can be bothered to vote. The undead Silver tries to reassume command but is executed for dereliction of duty. 2114. Judgment Day. The time-traveling Sabbath the Necromagus unleashes zombies upon every megacity on Earth. An international coalition of judges is sent to take him out, but not before 5 entire megacities have been nuked when it appears they're lost to the zombies. The final death toll is 3 billion. Following the loss of many judges to the zombies, Magruder instigates the Mechanismo Project robot judges, to the outrage of many senior judges. As it becomes clear she is increasingly senile and unstable. 2115. Grice breaks out of the Titan penal colony and takes over the city by infecting the population with the deadly meat virus, incapacitating many judges. After much random death and destruction, including the destruction of the Statue of Judgment, Grice is defeated. Dredd deliberately sabotages the Mechanismo project. 2116. A gathering of side judges attempt to make Magruder step down, but to no avail. After her pet Mechanismo project goes wrong and a rogue Mechanismo robot tries to kill her, she finally steps down from office. An election is held among the judges and Judge Volt becomes the new chief judge. 2117. Satan emerges from the fallen Icarus asteroid, shrugs off every Justice Department attack and threatens to destroy the city. Side Judge Anderson barely defeats him. 2118. Judicial crackdown on the French crime syndicate in Sector 301 leads to major retaliation, with heavy rioting and gang violence that puts the sector's judges in a retreat. After a siege at traffic station Alamo, the battle is won by the judges. Magruder dies in battle in the Cursed Earth, rather than compulsory euthanasia. Megacity 1 briefly attacked by Dune sharks. 2121. 15 million children depart the city for an underground haven in the Cursed Earth. Crime lord Nero Narcos triggers the Mark II lawgivers to self-destruct and then starts the Second Robot War. The judges are briefly overthrown before Dredd, with help from Brit-Cit, reprograms Narcos robot reinforcements to turn on their comrades and the judges are able to retake control. Judge Volt commits suicide over the event, which is hushed up. Judge Hershey becomes the new chief judge. 2123. An army composed of perps from parallel universes, led by an alter-dimensional Judge Karl, invade Megacity 1. Megacity 1, Brit-Cit, and Hondo ally to prevent a partnership between East Meg 2 and the alien Lawlords. An obvious first step in a Lawlord conquest of Earth. 2124. Orlok captured, but not before releasing a virus that kills tens of thousands of citizens. Judge Death escapes confinement. 2125. Mutant terrorist Mr. Bones attacks the Hall of Justice with a hostile alien species. Orlok put on trial and then executed on live TV. 2126. Terrorist group Total War triggers multiple nuclear bombs, resulting in the deaths of 4 million people. 2127. Hundreds of thousands of citizens have been left homeless by the bombings, and live in overcrowded, crime-ridden emergency camps. The Half-Life Plague, spread by a traitor inside a vision, spreads a wave of murderous violence that eventually kills 1 million people. The Sisters of Death launch another attack, with entire blocks being wiped out by plagues and poltergeist activity. 2128. Megacity 1 leads a peacekeeping mission to Ciudad Barranquilla during a civil war. This turns out to be a pretense for regime change, putting in a new supreme judge that they can control. 2129. Death of Judge Fargo. A portal opens to the dark matter-composed fifth dimension Kaluza. Demonic creatures invade the city, slaughtering whole sectors and causing crime, increasing psychic backlash until the judges invaded Kaluza and shut the portal down. 30 city blocks designed by Findhorn Gask turn out to secretly be giant robots, which come to life and rampage through the city, before being convinced to stop and turned into a satellite city. Council of Five discusses and rejects a proposal by Dredd to end the mutant ban. Rejection followed by a massive crackdown by Dredd on the city's mutant farm facilities. Attempted coup by Space Corps veterans under General Vincent. Serial killer PJ Maybe, under a false identity, becomes mayor of Megacity 1. 2130. The anti-mutant laws are discussed again due to pressure from Dredd and repealed out of fear he will resign otherwise. There is widespread rioting by citizens as a result, followed by frequent hate crimes against mutant migrants. 2131. Events and disasters from the Bible devastate the low-life senior judges. Against the mutant rights laws, force a vote on replacing Hershey as chief judge in the hope of undoing the changes. Judge Francisco becomes chief judge, and the entire council of 5 is replaced. The decision is made to build townships for mutants, and Dredd is exiled to them. The townships will use mutants as deputies and allow trial by jury. Subtle conflict exists between Francisco and his council. 2132. Deputy Chief Judge Sinfield usurps Francisco using brainwashing drugs and becomes acting chief judge. Laws become even harsher for mutants. PJ maybe attempts to assassinate Sinfield, hospitalizing him, and his identity is discovered by the judges. Sinfield is arrested and Francisco returns to office. MC-1 covertly deploys psychic weapons in Sino-CIT territory, testing how they can handle psi warfare. After a vicious war with corrupt judges, the Hondo Yakuza take over the low-life's criminal underworld. 2133. Francisco attempts to balance the budget with various cost-cutting measures. With the buzzword, the big community, a nuclear bomb is detonated in Sector 17, killing 500,000 people. The low-life's judges, particularly the Wally Squad, are purged due to criminal infiltration. The Black Ops Division under Judge Bachman quietly assassinates the Township Chief Judge of Mutant Township 3 and his deputies, in order to put a less liberal judge in charge. New elections for mayor are held, with several candidates killed by an escaped maybe. East Meg agents capture a prominent biologist and prepare to unleash the Chaos Bug bioweapon on the city. 2134. The Chaos Bug is released, in conjunction with multiple terrorist assaults and SOV sabotage. Foreign allies only send robots, due to fear of infection. Most of the Academy of Law in public surveillance are killed, and the Statue of Judgment destroyed. The Dark Judges temporarily escape. A rejected proposal to simply murder the infected is made public, sparking a vast uprising that devastates the city and allows the bug to spread. An overwhelmed Justice Department is forced to genuinely murder the infected and only wins against the uprising because the smoke from burning blocks drives insurgents off the streets. By the time the virus dies out, 350 million citizens and 60% of the judges are dead. Justice Department is near collapse. Bolstered by a 40,000-strong mutant army from the Cursed Earth townships, Francisco resigns and Hershey forms an interim government. The economy has collapsed and welfare ends. Space Corps Marines are recalled to the city to help restore order but are soon at odds with both judges and citizens after trying to airstrike a rebellious bloc. Judge Bachman attempts a coup, in which many judges and citizens are killed. It is prevented in part by a returning Judge Smiley, founder of Black Ops. 2135. After a trial attack on Gateway Colony, the Alien X-Hind launch an invasion of human space. The war lasts 16 weeks. The Battle of 43 Riga is Megacity wants one chance to stop the X-Hind reaching the inner colonies, and relies on a peace deal with Luther's rebel forces. Immediately after victory, MC-1 forces massacre the rebels. 2136. Under ex-Judge Amy Nixon, the Titan convicts revolt and leave to form an independent colony on Enceladus. The weaker MC-1 is forced to accept this. Justice Department is exposed as having 24/7 surveillance in all of the newly built city blocks, and suspend the program after widespread riots. The journalist who broke the story is later murdered. The alien warlords take control of the 2050s orbital lasers and declare rule over Megacity 1, but are beaten back. 2,137. By October 2137, the population stands at 72 million and is growing rapidly. However, the destruction of the Academy of Law during Chaos Day has disrupted the supply of cadets, and it is all the remaining judges can do to cope with the expanding population, as it will be years before replacement of losses is reliable again. 2,138. Texas City attempts to take over Megacity 1 in a coup, but is thwarted by Judge Dredd and others. Other cities mentioned in Judge Dredd. The first mention of other megacities came in Robot Wars, with the Texas City oil freighter. In the later Lunar 1, when Dredd was appointed Judge Marshal of the Lunar 1 colony. The narration states that the colony is run by the three great cities of North America, of which one is Texas City. In the next issue, the first Lunar Olympics would introduce the SOV cities. Megacity 2 on the West Coast was introduced in the story The Cursed Earth, 1978. Since then, the exact number, location, nature, and even name of megacities fluctuates depending on the writer and strip. In other media, Megacity 1 is the setting of the 2012 film Dredd, though it occupies a smaller area than described in the comics. According to Judge Dredd, Karl, the boundaries of Megacity 1 reach from Boston to Washington, D.C. Quote, similar to the real-life concept of the Northeast megalopolis, and contains a population of 800 million. The city blocks are large, brutalist structures that tend to be slum areas. Each block can seal itself off with blast shields and communications blackouts in case of war. Technology is a lot less advanced, outside of Justice Department equipment, and all non-judge vehicles resemble early 21st century models. See also Judge 2000 AD. The AZ of Judge Dredd. By Mike Butcher. Hamlin. 1995. ISBN 978-0600584087. Travels in Toontown, Part 2. Building Design. September 26, 2007. Lowlife. Creation Part 5. All the Joy I See Through These Architects' Eyes. By Disraeli. April 1, 2009.